An interesting underlying theme, amazing characters, an enjoyable combat system, enticing and humorous writing, an intriguing overarching story set in a fun-to-explore world. What do all of these things have in common? Well, they're what makes, in my opinion, a perfect RPG. And not many can lay claim to being able to tick all of those boxes. Typically, if a game has an amazing world to explore, it suffers in the story or combat. And if the game has excellent combat, it may not have the character development from a narrative standpoint that you may be seeking. But one game that does manage to tick all of them is Final Fantasy IX. It was a return to the classic look of the Final Fantasy series. No more edgy storytelling like 8, no more guns, high-rise buildings, and fancy technology. Back to the roots of castles, magic, pointy hat mages, and airships. Final Fantasy IX was like a love letter, celebrating all the previous Final Fantasies before 7 and 8, returning to what made it great. The light-hearted magic themes of the previous titles had returned. No more battle mechs and militaries, but back to the monsters, dragons, and evil queens. We seriously have to figure this out, guys. Stop with the monarchies. The evil ones. No more do-it-all type characters, a return to the long-forgotten job system, but it keeps it fresh through the inventory equip system being able to mix up your spells. Overall, it's a beautiful take on the Final Fantasy genre. This game managed to feel nostalgic even back when the first time I popped it in my PlayStation 2. It was bliss. The soundtrack, even just from the menu, hits you, and just pure serotonin floods your body. It was such a beautiful game that even 23 years after its release, I am still here to gush over it all over again. But first, welcome back, gaming gurus, to my channel. You find yourself here once again seeking entertainment, controversial opinions, and good times. Today's episode, we'll be going over why Final Fantasy IX is the best Final Fantasy game. Post-PlayStation. The first thing I want to touch on is the outstanding soundtrack of 9, right? I recognize that 7 also has some pretty banger songs, and I'm sure 8 does too, but the battle theme in 9 is unmatched. Oh, and the victory soundtrack is one of my personal favorite pieces of gaming music of all time. And it's just a simple 58-second tune congratulating you on winning your battle. It's simple, but it brings back so many memories of back in the day when I was first playing Final Fantasy IX. And it's also probably one of the more iconic sounds in Final Fantasy, you know. Da 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 da. You know, it's just iconic. Oh, Vivi's theme is also adorable too. It perfectly fits with the character when listening to it. It almost has this quality that makes you want to like waddle to the beat while Vivi watts. And of course, the opening theme to the game, A Place to Call Home, is so beautiful to listen to. While on the topic of Vivi, I want to talk about the characters in your party in 9 and why I think this game mastered the art of character development better than any other Final Fantasy. Members of your party in 9 are as followed: Zidane, 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 whatever you want to call them, Vivi, Dagger, Steiner, Aiko, Quina, Amarant, and Freya. This grouping of characters might just be some of my favorite and one of the more unique parties you can get throughout the Final Fantasy universe. It features a thief, a black mage, a mercenary, a knight, a princess, her younger summoner counterpart, a mouse dragoon, and a frog-loving blue mage. Most of these characters have their own unique designs, minus Dagger just being a basic female human and Steiner being a basic knight human. But since everyone else is so different looking, they both blend in without looking alike. Every character is unique in their own way. I particularly really enjoyed the design of Vivi, going back to the classic pointy hat black mages. Quina, this lovable non-gender character, and Freya. All of them look very interesting. With Vivi, it's this dark, mysterious looking black mage who's actually a bit of a klutz and wants to know if he's a real person. With Quina, it's this lovable, genderless Q person whose love of food has led them to seek out new cuisines, including enemies, in their eternal quest to find new foods. Quina also serves as a comic relief in this game, aside from Steiner being a rust bucket and Vivi tripping. Each character has its place in your party, and with 9, it never really feels like you're being punished, no matter what party you decide to go with. It's really enjoyable to just be able to choose whatever party I want, because I like how they look or act, instead of just choosing them simply for their job. But what really makes this game special? I believe it's actually the deep-rooted symbolism of each character in Final Fantasy IX. The game's unique and powerful characterizations and representations of character traits are one of its strong suits. Zidane symbolizes being a good person, and as his quote reads, "You don't need a reason to help people." Vivi represents suffering from external dread and belonging, and his quote reads, "How do you prove that you exist? Maybe we don't exist." Steiner represents sworn fealty and questioning that loyalty after learning you'd been led astray, and his quote reads as such, "Having sworn fealty, must I spend my life in servitude." Garnet, or dagger, represents pure beauty, both outwardly, beauty both outwardly and inwardly. Her quote reading, "Someday I will be queen, but I will always be myself." Freya represents despair, as she was forgotten by her loved one, her quote reading, "To be forgotten is worse than death." Quina is desire, or gluttony, in most tales. Her quote reading, "I do what I want. You have a problem?" Amarant is the stereotypical loner who only believes in his own strength, his quote being, "The only dependable thing about the future is uncertainty." Aiko representing solitude and loneliness, as her quote goes, "I don't want to be alone anymore." Each character has clearly defined traits and are represented well in the plot of Final Fantasy IX. Although some of the latter characters seem to have gotten abandoned for the later parts in the game, probably due to time on development, but they still have enough screen time to have meaningful development. Now, let's get into something less philosophical and more tangible. The battle system in Final Fantasy IX is quite interesting. You have these bars that fill up to determine when you get to attack in the queue. The animations of attacks, spells, and items are quite long in 9, and you may be thinking this is a bad thing, and yes, it can get quite annoying, but there's actually a reason for it. The bars do not stop charging during animations, so when you cast a spell like Doomsday that takes 10 years because Vivi's too short to cast it, everyone's bar will be full by the time the spell is over. This means that you're about to get smacked by the enemies, but also that you have 3 other party members ready to dish out some damage, while Vivi is, in this case, is vulnerable to attack. It's quite the enjoyable system once you get the hang of it. It's probably one of my favorite fighting systems in a JRPG, as it isn't just stereotypical turn-based combat, but has some flair, yet it's not as annoying as 8's Junction system or 7's Materia combat system. The start of Final Fantasy IX is such a fun opening to a game. It starts off with you trying to kidnap the Princess of Alexandria, Garnet, but through a wacky turn of events and bad parenting, she actually wants you to kidnap her. You get to do a fun sword fighting minigame, play a little bit as both Vivi and Steiner, who end up joining your party later. You can play the card game as well. It's a fun opening, but it soon turns grim as your ship crash lands in the evil forest. Garnet almost dies, then Vivi almost dies, then Blank gets petrified and probably wishes he died. The game starts off amazing, the middle of the game is enjoyable as it builds on the characters, and it ends on a high note as well. Not only does the game make a full circle, but each character also has their full circle moment as the game progresses. It feels like a true conclusive experience tailored for your enjoyment. I think the shift from turn-based to action-based combat in the Final Fantasy series has really ruined their ability to deliver an enjoyable experience. A lot more work and thought has to be put into action-style combat, and as such it takes away from something else. Like in the case of Final Fantasy XV, Ignis and Prompto's character arcs are all but negligible side acts that happen very quickly without much thought. Prompto always reminded me of like the Walmart version of Vivi, another character yearning for belonging due to his troubled and uncertain origins. But whereas Vivi is well developed throughout the entirety of the game, Prompto fails to have that same appeal. If the studio were to make turn-based games, they might just be able to deliver us another enthralling experience like 9 did. One can only hope. Until then, we still have Octopath Traveler 2 to look forward to. I should probably say something negative about this game too, right? Just to balance it out. Well, my biggest regret with Final Fantasy IX is that I'll never be able to experience it for the first time again. And that's about the only bad thing I have to say about this game. Except I also really suck at that opening fight scene. Like I have to retry it like 8 times to get it perfect. And also the card game, I also suck at that too. But that's skill issue, not game issue. Thank you for watching as always. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing. I really love making content and would love for you to join the gaming gurus, pushing positivity, starting mind-scratching conversations, and having a good old fun time. And if you want to get uploads early, my whole upload schedule, personally talk with me about anything, as well as future access to the Discord, then consider subscribing to my Patreon to help support me in my content creation journey. And if you prefer a more direct approach to support, I also have a donation link in the description below, where you can directly send me money to my PayPal. All money is appreciated, but please don't send it if you can't. I really appreciate just even the thought alone. And with that, I'll catch you in the next video. In case you missed it, here's a previous awesome upload I'm sure you will enjoy.